The idea came up to do a book about Phnom Penh. Why this book? Because first of all, we found there is not much available information written in books, in reports, in files somewhere in the archives. There's very little information about architecture in Phnom Penh. Then we thought, with all the recent urban development and investment and the change in Phnom Penh, we need to document the historic architecture from different periods, because who knows whether they will stand in the future.
Before we decided to start with the book, we already knew a lot of things. We have a lot of experience. Walter worked for the municipality of Phnom Penh as a consultant, and me, I interviewed some of the Cambodian architects from the 60s. So we already knew a lot of things, but in fact it was a much deeper research needed, and from the middle of last year to middle of this year we did taking pictures here in Phnom Penh and did some research here in Phnom Penh and did some research at other places, so nearly a year.
I never wrote an architectural guidebook before, so it was learning by doing, and so I learned a lot. That's one thing, and the other thing is, by doing this we found out many new things. We met people, new friends, made new friends, and we found really astonishing buildings and situations in the city that we didn't know before. We just literally stumbled upon them by driving through the city. And then, having found these remarkable buildings, we also, sometimes being lucky, sometimes by hard research, we found a lot of information about these buildings and the history behind those buildings. And that was very enjoyable for me.
The result of all this fun we had and was that in the beginning we wanted to do 100 buildings and 200 pages for the book. Now the book ended up to have 141 buildings and 364 pages. So that was a really hard work to do this, but as you can see, we had so much fun, and we went deeper and deeper into the topic, and when we did our strolls through the city and did more research, so we found a huge amount of buildings. And what we can say, if we would have more time, and then we could have added 50 more buildings. So there is enough, and there would be enough buildings and material to add some more stuff.
I arrived in Phnom Penh first time quite late in 2006. At that time, having known other Asian cities for more than 20 years, I found Phnom Penh to be very unique in the sense that for a capital city in Southeast Asia, it was still very quiet, had a very laid-back pace. You could walk the streets, you could go by cyclo, and there were lots of trees. And then there were all these old buildings that I recognized could be from French colonial time, but also these modern buildings that I have never seen before in other Southeast Asian countries with a very distinct style. So I thought, wow, a very, very, very special city in Southeast Asia.
I still remember that when I did my plans, Walter told me, well, if you come to Cambodia, you have to look at this post-independence architecture as an architect. So, and you need to spend some time here in Phnom Penh to have a look at this architecture. And so I did this, and I spent, I think, 3 weeks here in Phnom Penh and followed these traces of post-independence architecture. And I've never seen this before, an architecture like this before in any other country, which melted this international modernism with the Khmer architecture. And this was very fascinating for me, and really at this moment a long history started for myself, for my research, well, that lasts until today. And this was a very unique feeling.
Well, as Moritz said before, there was a lot of information available for us already. We were interested in the architecture and in the history of the city already. Moritz had done some research and articles. I had worked as a consultant in the country. And then by chance, Moritz got to know a German publisher with international series of architectural guidebooks. Moritz came up with the idea of the book, and it took a time for us to get the project started.
We thought it would be simply a shame go deeper into the topic, as we already knew a lot of things. It would have been a waste to not write it down and bring it to others. So, and what we also realized that on an international level, Cambodia is mostly known for Angkor Wat and the Khmer Rouge. So, and the first time I've been here, I spent 8 weeks in the country, and I thought, well, there's so much more than just the Khmer Rouge and Angkor Wat. For me especially, it was this post-independence architecture, but this also, like Walter described, the French architecture, French colonial architecture, and as we discovered during our work, there's some really interesting contemporary architecture. This is for me another important reason to show that it is not only that this country has more than Angkor and Khmer Rouge.
I may continue, because Moritz talked about our motivation or objectives for with our work. Basically, there is no architectural guide until now for Phnom Penh, until this book came out. We thought, with all the huge development going on and the building boom, the construction boom in the city, and the changes, the demolition of old buildings for new high-rise buildings and new commercial development, the city is changing very fast. And we thought, for all these exceptional, outstanding buildings, we need to document them before they are gone. Or, even more positive, optimistic, we need to maybe raise more awareness for the value of those buildings and those architecture, so that probably people can get proud of what they have in Phnom Penh, which is still unique and outstanding in Southeast Asia.
Another obstacle is the lack of documents, especially from the period of independence, where there's not much research done, but also a lot of the documents, the plans from the architects, photographies, whatever, a lot of documents are destroyed. In some cases, we really struggled or failed to find deeper information. So this we leave to further generations. But yes, that's I think a problem that especially Cambodia has, because of this Khmer Rouge time, where a lot of documents were destroyed. Even later, when the Vietnamese used the paper of magazines and documents to print new newspapers. So even then, documents were destroyed. And That's a difference to other countries.
Another obstacle was actually we had to come up with some finance for our, let's say, 1 year of work, because also we have to live from something, and we had to come here at least 4 times, spent time in the city, went to the archive in France. So we had a lot of costs, and somehow we had to cover those costs. And we were a bit clueless, coming from different professions, not from fundraising. But luckily, we remembered some old friends from Cambodia and made some new friends living in Cambodia, business people, very well connected. And we were able, in a very short time, through their support, to build up a network and do some really successful fundraising, really supported by them. We wouldn't have been able to do this on our own. And we are very, very grateful that we found these people, and they heavily supported us. And without those friends and just people that we know them since 1 year, but they heavily supported the idea to have this book. And we learned that even these financial obstacles can be overcome, because actually, as one Khmer friend puts it, the money is there. You just need to know the right people if you have a good objective and a good project.
We had a lot of exciting moments during this phase. I just want to connect this to what Walter said about the funding. So the situation, we as foreigners came to Phnom Penh to do this book, and the situation, how we were welcomed. So by the Cambodian community here in Phnom Penh, we said, well, that's so nice that you do this for us. So how can we support? And a lot of people supported us, not only with sponsorship, but also with information. They invited us to their offices. So the younger architects invited us to their offices, or people gave us other information. So that was really exciting to see.
When we came here, we thought there will be all this interesting architecture, but mainly from the history, more recent history or long-term history. But then we found out, actually, since in the last 5 years, there's a lot of new projects going on, not only from the foreign architect, but also from the young Khmer architect. Some even having their own offices and doing good business now. And projects that we both found really interesting and really promising for the future of architecture in Phnom Penh and in Cambodia, even more committed to doing this.
After 2 months of research, we found the name of an architect that we didn't know before. Found a building that we somehow liked, that looked interesting because of its architecture. In the 60s, it was built as a hotel, and now has changed its functions. So, and in the end, we find out who the architect was. That it was so that we could find out the whole history of the building. And we had some buildings where we didn't know much at the beginning, and in the end, we could set up the whole story. So, and these were really great moments. But also, when we looked for 2 months for the name of the architect, and then by chance we found it.
One day I somehow screened the aerial photo on Google Earth for special roof shapes or just special roofs, to find some probably older buildings in the center of blocks, and found one big one. Went there with a motorbike. Looked very special, not a normal residential building, some special function. Found in the historical map, there was a French artillery based there, so it was a military building. And then for a long time we didn't find out anything until Moritz, by chance, found out that in his huge collection of historic postcards of Phnom Penh, he had actually one postcard of exactly that building. So we could identify the building, we could date the building, and we could even see how the surroundings of the building had changed throughout the decades of urban development. That was one of the small research findings where we could find and then somehow put a building into context.
Yeah. It's putting the pieces of the puzzle together. So that's what we had to do several times. And well, like Walter said, a lot of things happen by chance, just by walking through the streets, by screening Google Earth and things like this, and then combining things, comparing with historical pictures or my postcard archive.
Be especially useful for young architect or the architecture student, but I think it should be useful for the tourist visiting the city, if he or she is interested in the history of Phnom Penh, of course in architecture as well, but you don't have to be a professional to read the book and to understand the book. It's also for people who haven't studied architecture. It's easy writing, it's easy reading. There's a lot of photos and maps and pictures and drawings, so it can be easily understood. And in the end, we also hope that it will not only be read by architects and architecture students and the tourists, but also by some people who are stakeholders in urban development, in architecture and construction. Can be developer, can be decision maker, can be from administration. So we hope it will find a broad audience. Basically, when I'm not working as an urban planner or writing books, I'm doing a lot of photographing, walking a lot in nature, drawing, but not sketching landscapes, sketching urban situations.
In fact, I don't have a hobby. So for me, my work is my hobby, collecting postcards, and especially collecting postcards of Cambodia and Phnom Penh. That is the only thing that you could describe as a hobby, but it's also related to the topic.
We would like to do a Khmer edition in Khmer language of this book, because the book is in English. As we know, not everybody in Cambodia can speak and read, understand fluent English, and we want to make the book even more accessible to everybody. And so our next project is to raise the funds to do the translation, the layout and the printing for this book with the same content but in Khmer language. And we hope to do that in this year to make it available, even more available to students and other Cambodians.
Just start if you have a good idea. Check if you have a good idea, and if you think it's good, start somehow. And don't think too much. Will this be possible? How will it end up? Will I raise the money? So will I get paid well? And will it work in the end? Will people like my work? So I think it's better to check if you by yourself think your idea is a strong and a good idea, and if you are able to devote yourself to this idea. And if you say, yes, I want to do it, don't think twice, do it. So I think this is very, very important. As I'm talking about myself, I'm always worrying about things, and sometimes I worry too much, and then the idea is ruined, the atmosphere is ruined, and after a year you don't want to do it anymore. And especially this book is a good example for doing it the other way around. When we started, we didn't have the funding, so we said, okay, let's begin it. It is important, we want to do it, and we will find a way to do it.
Even more for me, I'm not a writer, I'm an urban planner by profession. Okay, you have to write a lot of reports as an urban planner, but that's the technical reports for urban planners and politicians. So it's very much learning by doing. And I would say don't be afraid of learning by doing approach or muddling through approach, because in the end you learn and you learn and you learn all the time, and you get better, and people will help you.